to the high-level segment. Thanks a lot for media joining us. Very warm welcome to our Chancellor of the Republic of Germany and the President of Egypt as the upcoming presidency of the next climate conference, where we're all looking forward to meet each other in Egypt to build our future together in the light of the climate crisis. And I would like to give the word now to the Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz.
Excellency, President Al-Sisi, Mr. Hart, Ministers, Annalena Baerbock, ladies and gentlemen. There's one idea that has been for thousands of years a driving progress all around the world, and it is this: to give future generations a good life. This thought is central when we are talking about our planet's climate in two respects. That is, firstly, because it forces us to face up to what we've actually all known for a long time now. If we do not act much faster, much more resolutely, and much more united on climate change mitigation, then we will not be able to keep this promise to future generations. The recent heat wave in India and Pakistan, the floods in Brazil at the start of the year, or in the Ahr Valley and North Rhine-Westphalia last year, which we remembered last week, such events send a clear message. We must limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. However, the thought of future generations also points the way forward. Just as the hope of prosperity and a better life has ensured advancement for millennia, so it can also bring crucial progress on climate action if we succeed in combining the goal of climate neutrality with this promise of prosperity. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the path we must take. In 30 years' time, our planet is likely to be home to 2 billion more people than today, predominantly in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Do we really believe that we can present them with a choice, either climate action or prosperity? They must all have the prospect of prosperity and of an intact planet. Nor can we ask the citizens of our countries to be less mobile. How is that supposed to work in a globalized, interconnected world? Climate action will succeed only if it has the support of a broad majority of our societies, and that is true in all our countries. Or, to put it in another way, climate action will succeed if it brings tangible improvements to our lives, with a modern, affordable energy supply, for example, or with wind turbines and solar installations instead of smoky chimneys, or mobility without the exhaust fumes. One example of how this might be managed comes from Egypt. Your government, Mr. President, is currently building a high-speed rail network that will connect people while protecting the climate. This describes the challenge ahead of us, namely to rev up climate action while at the same time safeguarding and creating prosperity. Here in Germany, back at the beginning of this legislative term, we said that this decade would be the decade of transformation, the decade in which we lay the foundations for a carbon-neutral economy. In less than 25 years, by 2045, we want to be one of the first climate-neutral industrial countries. Putin's brutal war of aggression against Ukraine, his use of energy as a weapon, rapidly rising energy prices, all this merely reinforces our commitment to that goal. We need to phase out coal, oil and gas, and I'd almost be tempted to say go at it full throttle. So our motto is try and stop us. Because what must not happen is that we slide into a global renaissance of fossil energy, and coal in particular. No one can be pleased that the share of coal-fired power generation is rising again, in Germany as well, in response to looming bottlenecks in gas supplies. This makes it all the more important for us to state in no uncertain terms that this is an emergency measure imposed for a very short, limited period of time, and it does not take away from our climate targets. And the same is true of investment in the gas infrastructure. Yes, we temporarily need new LNG capacities so that the lights don't go out in people's homes or in factories and businesses here and in many other countries around the world. Factories, by the way, that often produce the very technologies we need to achieve climate neutrality. However, it is also clear that everything we do today to secure the supply of gas has to be in conformity with our goal of becoming carbon neutral in Germany and worldwide. Specifically, this means not creating any new lasting dependencies on fossil fuels, not here and not in the producer countries. If we launch new energy partnerships today, then it has to be with a clear perspective for the energy transition and the shift to green hydrogen. And not least of all, we are fixing an expiry date for the use of fossil fuels. At the G7 summit in Elmau, we decided to decarbonize the energy sector in our countries as fast as possible by 2035. What this means for Germany is that in 2030, we will be getting 80% of our electricity from renewables. By the same date, we will be producing 50% of heat in a climate neutral manner. These are the targets we have set ourselves. We've set out the course for how to achieve them over the past weeks and months. We've set new targets for expansion, using 2% of our land area for wind power in future, for instance. Approval procedures will be greatly accelerated. Above all, though, we have enshrined one thing in law, and that is from now on the expansion of renewable energies is in the overriding public interest, not only in a political sense, but also in law. In the interest of climate change mitigation, in the interest of an affordable supply of energy, and in the interest of our country's security and energy independence. We regard all this as our contribution to a joint global effort by industrialized countries, developing countries, and emerging economies. And this meeting too underlines that. Today we're really living up to the venue's name. Weltsaal translates as World Hall, and thanks to your participation, the whole world is represented here today. If we are not to lose sight of the 1.5 degree target, we must almost halve our CO2 emissions globally before the end of the decade. Here too, we will only succeed if we think about climate change mitigation and prosperity in conjunction. All over the world, we need cars that run on electricity generated from renewable energy and planes that have climate-neutral fuel in their tanks. We need carbon-neutral steel and climate-neutral cement to build our bridges and houses. Green hydrogen to power industries, high-performance wind turbines and solar installations, and the flow of goods between our countries needs to become climate-friendly. In short, we must approach the conversion to climate neutrality as a global modernization program. A modernization program in which states, companies, scientists, and citizens work closely together. That is why, at the G7 summit in Elmau, we launched a partnership for global infrastructure and investment. Together with the business community, we want to invest $600 billion over the next 5 years in modern infrastructure, the digital transformation, health, education, and clean energy. That will also hugely advance climate change mitigation. One focus of Germany's engagement will be the Just Energy Transition Partnerships. Along with development banks and companies, we will support the partner countries in decarbonizing their energy sector. And it is not by chance that the first partner country is an African one, South Africa, that is. We're talking to other countries about setting up further partnerships. And we want to do more to drive the energy transition in our neighboring continent, especially. The UN Climate Change Conference in your country, President El-Sisi, is the perfect opportunity. Partnerships like the Just Energy Transition Partnerships make a very real contribution to driving forward the UN-led climate process and its goals. This process remains crucial. However, if we want to implement the Paris climate goals, and that has to be our goal, then we need new forms of cooperation alongside the climate change conferences. And that is the idea behind an open and cooperative climate club. At the G7 summit, we took steps towards establishing the climate club before the end of this year. I believe an association of ambitious countries like this can have 3 goals. Firstly, together we will accelerate the climate-neutral transformation of our industrial sectors. We have not made enough progress here yet, because everyone is afraid that their companies will move to neighboring countries with laxer rules, and we can only escape this dilemma by working together, by intensifying international cooperation on climate policy, creating international lead markets for climate-friendly technologies, and strengthening confidence in international climate policy coordination. In this way, it's worth noting, we will also avoid a global patchwork of tariffs and import duties, a jungle of varying standards and measuring methods, stringent and less stringent rules. Secondly, the Climate Club will create new markets for climate-friendly products, such as green steel or green hydrogen. Creating a level playing field boosts investment in new technologies. Putting such a reliable international framework in place for climate action is a key task for government. Thirdly, we will bring together North and South, industrial countries, emerging economies, and developing countries. The Climate Club is open to everyone. And to get as many on board as possible, we want to support those who, as things stand today, might otherwise not be able to become climate neutral quite as quickly. Paradoxically, there are often problems in exactly those places where solar and wind power would already be profitable, even without state support, thanks to the favourable geographical conditions. What's lacking, though, is funding, and we need to enable financing options, particularly for especially vulnerable countries and population groups. We will therefore work with development banks and the financial sector to launch new investment. As the G7, we're committed to the industrial countries' goal of mobilizing $100 billion of climate finance as quickly as possible through to 2025. Germany wants to help reach this goal by providing at least €6 billion a year by 2025 at the latest. And I also want to reaffirm the industrial countries' joint pledge to double our contribution to adaptation finance by 2025. President El-Sisi, we want to work with you to find practicable solutions to deal with loss and damage from climate change. This will be a major issue at the upcoming climate change conference. As the G7, we've emphasized that we will not abandon affected citizens or states. By the time of the climate change conference, therefore, we want to establish a global shield against climate risks. The fact that many technological solutions are available now makes me feel optimistic. The priority now must be to put them into action around the world, because then, ladies and gentlemen, we will automatically do what I spoke about at the outset: link climate action and prosperity. And we will be keeping that great promise that has forever ensured that humanity advances to give future generations a good life in a world worth living in. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much. It's really an honor to have the German Chancellor here at the Petersberger Klimadialog, and the same counts for the President of Egypt, President Al-Sisi. Very warm welcome again to the Foreign Ministry, and thanks for joining us here at the Petersberger Klimadialog high-level segment. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Federal Foreign Minister. Allow me to start with my remarks. Federal Chancellor Olaf Scholz, Excellencies, participants, I would like to express my gratitude to German Chancellor Olaf Scholz for convening this meeting, and I would like to highlight the leading role of Germany in fighting climate change and tackling its consequences. It is a Germany is assuming a role that represents also its role at global level in order to support the fight against climate change and to achieve the just transition to a green energy sector. We are meeting today here at the Petersburg Climate Dialogue, and this is a demonstration of this commitment. And this dialogue has been one of the most important conferences over the last years in the run-up to the annual conferences of the parties, as it presents an opportunity for coordination and consultation between parties in order to achieve a consensus between the different parties regarding the different topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this year Egypt will be hosting the COP27 in the midst of a number of challenges, among them the current energy crisis, the food security crisis affecting several developing countries, the debt crisis, financing crisis, and also the repercussions of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the geopolitical consequence of Russia's war of aggression in Ukraine. And all of this is a huge responsibility for us as the international community in ensuring that our common vision will not be hindered as we stipulated in the Paris Agreement and reaffirmed last year in Glasgow. And based on that, today I would like to mention several issues that Egypt, as the future COP presidency, deems important. First of all, scientific evidence shows that climate change has become an existential threat, and it does not allow any delay in the implementation of our commitments, since all of the parties have agreed to implementing these priorities, the objectives of the Paris Agreement targets. In alignment with the other international treaties and principles. One thing is also important. It is important to mention the principles of equality and collective action, but also differentiated action based on the different capabilities of the countries. And therefore, as future presidency of the COP27, we will ensure that this conference will be a turning point for global climate action, and that these actions will be implemented on the ground. So this is about building on the existing climate change mitigation dynamics and guaranteeing implementation towards a green economy and curbing the impacts of the climate crisis. And in order to flesh out this vision, Germany is very grateful for the support and participation of all partners, which helps us to achieve our objectives and targets. And in this context, I highly welcome the G7 declaration, which took place last month here in Germany with regard to the environment and the climate. I welcome the positive position taken in this declaration. And I would also like to highlight that these measures should also be expanded to other developing countries that are currently engaged in similar activities. It is very important to translate these visions and actions on the ground in the different negotiation tracks of the UN Framework Convention and the Paris Agreement. Because these negotiation tracks often represents positions or approaches that are not always in line with the visions and positions expressed at the political level. Third, our African continent is at the heart of these challenges and affected very strongly, more strongly than other regions, taking into consideration its special status and its limited ability to address the different crises and the limited financial resources to overcome these difficulties. And the most recent food and energy crises have further exacerbated the challenges that African countries are facing, in addition to the very real climate change threat. I would just like to mention desertification, water scarcity, rising sea levels, floods, and many other adverse climatic events these African countries are suffering from. And here I would also like to reaffirm the necessity to make every possible effort to support the African countries and to enable them to make use of their national resources and to achieve an economic development that is in line with the efforts of climate action and protection of the environment through a comprehensive approach taking into consideration national economic and development circumstances of each of these countries. Thanks to their huge territories and their potentials for creating or using renewable resources, the African countries have already taken concrete steps. I'm referring to solar and wind and also green hydrogen. And this also takes into account several industries such as automotive, agriculture, etc. Fourth, at an early stage, Egypt has taken effective steps to adopt a development model that is sustainable, that protects the environment and includes climate action. This is not only a reflection of Egypt's firm belief in the right of its people and of the coming generations, but we are also aware of the potential of a green transition for our economy in very vital sectors. So therefore, Egypt is taking very concrete, tangible steps in the area of renewable energies in order to increase our energy mix. And Egypt is currently drafting a comprehensive hydrogen strategy. We are drafting ambitious plans for electric interconnectivity with neighboring countries. And by doing so, we want to ensure that Egypt becomes a regional hub for renewable energy. There are also far-reaching plans for the use of clean transportation. There are several projects in our country, for instance, railway and financing of electric vehicles, etc. Also, there are water resource managers in order to adapt to the impacts of climate change and other projects that have to do with the comprehensive management of our resources and early warning systems. There are also ambitious plans in Egypt that reflect the comprehensive efforts. But these efforts require financing. This is indispensable. And for this reason, we need support and partnership with other countries and also international institutions, also financial institutions. And for this reason, I would like to invite all of you to further direct your efforts towards the next COP27. Egypt will do everything in its power, everything in its efforts in order to ensure that this COP will be a successful event. because we want to achieve or conclude agreements following our negotiations with our partners also at informal level, because our partners are valuable partners to us. And for this reason, we will take further initiative and action to engage in dialogue with non-governmental actors and institutions. And we would like to ensure that we find solutions and that we successfully achieve our 1.5 degree target in order to improve our life. Thank you very much.
Dear Excellencies, thank you very much for your strong and powerful speeches, also taking up many topics we have discussed in the morning with regard to the need to increase renewable energy as the most important step to come forward on the path to 1.5 degrees, but also the question of adaptation and loss and damage, as many colleagues have mentioned this morning. While the photographers are leaving the room, I am now delighted to give the floor to the Secretary General of the United Nations virtually. Secretary General Guterres, please, the floor is yours.
Excellencies, 8 months ago we left COP26 with 1.5 degrees on life support. Since then, its pulse has weakened further. Greenhouse gas concentration, sea level rise and ocean heat have broken new records. Half of humanity is in the danger zone from floods, droughts, extreme storms and wildfires. No nation is immune. Yet we continue to feed our fossil fuel addiction. What troubles me most is that in facing this global crisis, we are failing to work together as a multilateral community. Nations continue to play the blame game instead of taking responsibility for our collective future. We cannot continue this way. We must rebuild trust and come together to keep 1.5 alive and to build climate-resilient communities. Promises made must be promises kept. We need to move forward together on all fronts: mitigation, adaptation, finance, loss and damage. To protect people and the planet, we need an all-of-the-above approach that delivers on each of these pillars of the Paris Agreement at pace and at scale. Time is no longer on our side. First, we need to reduce emissions now. Everyone needs to revisit their nationally determined contributions, and we need to demonstrate at COP27 that the renewables revolution is underway. There is enormous potential for a just energy transition that accelerates coal phase-out with the corresponding deployment of renewables. The agreement with South Africa last November sets a good precedent. Partnerships and the discussion with Indonesia and Vietnam are also significant, and they embody the potential of working together in a multilateral and collaborative spirit. But let me be clear. These efforts should be additional, not a replacement, to the support that developing countries need to ensure their transition to a net zero and climate-resilient future. I look to the G7 and the G20 to show leadership on NDCs, on renewables, and on working together in good faith. Second, we must treat adaptation with the urgency it needs. 1 in 3 people lack early warning systems coverage. People in Africa, South Asia, and Central and South America are 15 times more likely to die from extreme weather events. This great injustice cannot persist. Let's ensure universal early warning systems coverage in the next 5 years as a start. And let's demonstrate how we can double adaptation finance to $40 billion a year and how we will scale it up to equal mitigation finance. Third, let's get serious about the finance that developing countries need. At a minimum, stop paying lip service to the $100 billion a year pledge. Give clarity through deadlines and timelines and get concrete on its delivery. And let's ensure that those who need funding most can access it. As shareholders of multilateral development banks, developed countries must demand the immediate delivery of the investments and assistance needed to expand renewable energy and build climate resilience in developing countries. Demand that these banks become fit for purpose, demand that they change their tired frameworks and policies to take more risk and dramatically improve their dismal private investment mobilization ratio of 29 cents to the dollar. They should increase funding that does not require sovereign guarantees. And they should use partnerships and instruments to take on risk that will unleash the trillions of dollars of private investment that we need. Let's show developing countries that they can rely on their partners. Force loss and damage has languished on the sidelines for too long. It is eroding the trust we need to tackle the climate emergency together. I've seen firsthand the impact of sea level rise, crippling drought and devastating floods. Loss and damage is happening now. We need a concrete global response that addresses the needs of the world's most vulnerable people, communities and nations. And the first step is to create a space within the multilateral climate process to address this issue, including on finance for loss and damage. Excellencies, this has to be the decade of decisive climate action. That means trust, multilateralism and collaboration. We have a choice, collective action or collective suicide. It is in our hands. Thank you.
Thanks to the Secretary General for the powerful words and underlining that it's in our hands. I would like to ask now a couple of hands, but only a couple because we have a time schedule. For those of you who would like to ask the question to the Chancellor of Germany or the President of Egypt, with regard, obviously, to the climate conference and our common fight regarding the climate crisis. Who would like to go first?
Thank you.
Bangladesh, yeah.
Thank you, Chancellor and also President of Egypt, for being here today to galvanize the momentum. But as you know, even this morning, as we have discussed this issue, COP current President Alok Sharma virtually told us that he had expressed his frustration in a way, because whatever we have heard at Glasgow, that is not yet to be, implemented, yet to be materialized. Those promises are not, are in the words, not in the, ground zero. So how best we can take actions onto the ground, adaptation actions onto the ground, mitigation actions at our domestic level, regional level, and also global scale. Those are key challenges, and also climate finance, how to ramp up climate finance, because we are supposed to mobilize $100 billion from 2020 per annum, but that is yet to happen, even if we are now at the almost, last quarter of 2022. So how best we can mobilize those resources so that those who are on ground zero can be rescued, can be, uplifted from their poverty level, from their, crisis situation. So this is now, as UN Secretary General just now asked us, it is at our hand. We need to galvanize this momentum, and it is now on your hand how best you can mobilize those resources at this crisis moment. Yes, we are in a war at Europe. We are at war even on climate front. So together, can we collectively solve this crisis on an emergency basis? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chodori, not only for Bangladesh, but also as the lead climate negotiator for the less developed countries. I would suggest that we collect the questions, and then we have a second question or remark from the Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ms. Massoudi, please.
Merci beaucoup, Excellence, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Madam Minister, for providing us with the opportunity to ask questions of these two senior personalities. Excellencies, President Al-Sisi, allow me to congratulate you once again and thank you for preparing COP27 and preparing for hosting us in Sharm el-Sheikh. And I would also like to thank you for involving the DRC in the preparation of COP27. COP27 is to build on the work and the achievements prepared by the scientific community. We have scientists who have been pointing out to us the high risks that we are confronting these days. And thanks to their effort, we've found solutions to some of the problems we're facing. The conference that will take place in September, the Conference of the Scientific Community, should bring together scientists from all over the world. Secondly, if I may ask a question, I